for this press conference. Before I hand over to our chief observer and the head of a delegation from the European Parliament, I'd like just to run through very quickly some practical aspects. The first one is that into Sinhala and Tamil. The channels, if you need it, are channel 0 for English, channel 1 for Sinhala, and channel 2 for Tamil. We also have a signer, as you'll see on the right here, and I'd be very grateful to we are live web streaming this on Facebook, just so you are aware of that fact. Thank you very much indeed, Marisa.
Good morning. I'll start to say that I'm a non-English native speaker, and unfortunately I cannot address you neither in Sinhala nor in Tamil. So if you have any doubts about my accent or misspelling, please feel comfortable to just say something on that. But we are here to present, as it was said, our preliminary findings of the electoral observation mission. So I want to address you all, members of the diplomatic community, distinguished members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, and good morning and thank you for being here, despite we had to do a final change and a late change in our schedule for this press conference. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to the Election Commission of Sri Lanka for inviting us to observe this presidential election and for the welcome and assistance extended by staff around the country to our long-term and short-term observers. We are very grateful as everything went very well in this domain. I would also like to thank to all the political parties and candidates, the religious leaders, civil society representatives, security services and journalists who have generously set aside time to meet us and to answer to our many, many questions throughout this entire process that already started more than 1 month ago. I would also like to thank and acknowledge the welcome which is given to our observers across the country by the people of Sri Lanka themselves. This was their day to exercise their vote, their right to vote, and they did it so in very high numbers, and at the same time they were able to receive us in such a good way that we have to thank all the people of Sri Lanka for that. You know that our mandate is to carry out an observation of the entire electoral process independently and in strict observance of the principles of neutrality, impartiality, and non-interference in any stage of the process. On election day, the mission observation strength was some 80 observers, including 30 long-term observers, 30 short-term observers. As you know, the long-term observers were in the country for more than 1 month in the election day. And we had also 5-person delegation of members of the European Parliament, whose head of delegation is my dear friend and colleague, Isabel Santos, and she will have the opportunity then to address you as well. On the election day and directly after, we observed voting in 329 polling stations across the country and more than 25 counting centers. I will try to present you now some of our findings, and after the press conference you will find all of them in much more detail in the preliminary statement that will be delivered to all of you. So our preliminary statements findings will be mainly divided in some key areas that we have been observing. The election day, the legal framework, the election commission, the voter register, the campaign finance, the traditional media and the social media. And that's what I'm going to try to do, is to shortly give you some of these findings, and then we can discuss a little bit more on that later if you have the will to do so. But before to come to that, I would like also to give you some general observations from our side. First observation is that a largely violence-free electoral process was well managed by the election administration. Secondly, a peaceful campaign on the ground contrasted with divisive rhetoric, hate speech, and disinformation in traditional and social media. Thirdly, the absence of a campaign finance law and biased coverage of the election by both private and state media contributed to an uneven playing field. And these, I think, are important general observations about our mission, which came from our observation mission, in order that we can have a full understanding of the findings that I'm going to start to present. On the election day, I want to tell you that the election day was peaceful and orderly, with a few violent incidents reported, and the turnout, as you know, was high at some 83%. The EU observers reported positively on the voting process across the country. All electoral materials were available, and polling officials performed well. However, in several polling stations, the position of the voting screen did not sufficiently protect the secrecy of the vote. Our observers assessed counting as well organized, transparent, and professional. Now, moving to the legal framework, overall, Sri Lanka's legal framework is adequate to conducting democratic elections in line with these international commitments, despite some gaps. Fundamental rights and freedoms are largely protected, but some restrictions in national law exceed the country's related international obligations. Limitations on campaign processions and on the dissemination of political messages during campaign periods conflict with the constitutional guarantees. The legal framework, for women's political participation in elections is lacking. However, some progress has been made on inclusivity for women in local government representation. The Election Commission's guidelines for the media and code of conduct for parties and candidates are positive elements in the legal framework, though they are largely voluntary in nature. Persistent parliamentary inaction left the constitutional powers of the Election Commission inadequately defined in law and limited its capacity to enforce its mandate to ensure a level playing field to all the candidates. And finally, still on the legal framework, there is no legal provisions for national and international election observation. Now moving to the Election Commission, overall, the Election Commission has carried out its function in a credible and professional manner. Regular consultation with political parties, candidates, media, the civil society organizations, and the police improved the level of confidence in the institution. Technical aspects of the electoral process were well administered and key operational deadlines were met. The electoral administration at district level was well organized and enjoyed general trust among stakeholders. The Election Commission and civil society organizations conducted voter awareness activities in Sinhala, Tamil, and English, including tailor-made messages for persons with disabilities. And finally, on the Election Commission, however, the Commission could have been more proactive and broader reaching on the crucial issue of explaining the marking of the voting preferences. And these are our main findings in a short way to this topic. We also want to give some findings in the voter register, as I said. The 2018 voter register contains a total of just short of 16 million voters, an increase of almost 1 million new voters since 2015 presidential election. Since the registration system does not foresee a revision period before an election, some 180,000 to 200,000 voters who turned 18 in the interim were disenfranchised for the 2019 election presidential election. On the campaign. Campaigning on the ground was peaceful and calm, despite a small number of violent incidents and reported threats. National security was a prominent theme with strong nationalist rhetoric often used. This also brought religious and ethnic rifts to the fore. We also observed that there were allegations of misuse of state resources. Recruitment to public service jobs was the most commonly reported abuse. Campaigning by public officials was also observed. The highest profile candidates, as you know, were Sajid Premadasa and Gotayaba Rajapaksa, who both attract large crowds at their rallies. They made extensive use of traditional media with a heavy presence in paid advertising in television and print media. There was a significant gap in resources between the two main candidates and the others, the vast majority of whom were scarcely visible. Moving now to the campaign finance, I want to highlight 3 points. Political party and campaign financing remain unregulated, depriving the election of an important element of transparency. Secondly, with no limits on campaign advertising spending, coverage in traditional and online media was highly monetized. And thirdly, the two leading candidates made extensive use of traditional media with a heavy presence in paid advertising in television and printing media. If we move to the traditional media, also some points should be highlighted from our observation. First, the media environment is characterized by a high concentration of ownership divided largely along political lines, which significantly influences content. Second, the Election Commission has constitutional power to issue guidelines to all media, state and private, but only state media have a legal duty to comply. Thirdly, state media kept to their legal requirement to allocate free time to candidates. Fourthly, there was a lack of in-depth and critical editorial analysis, in particular in broadcast media. And finally, fifthly, almost all media monitored by the European Union Electoral Observation Mission centered their reporting on the campaign of the front-runners, while access to the media was significantly limited for most of the other contestants. We also did observation, as you know, in social media, and in social media, overall, a damaging online environment distorted pluralistic debate and curbed voters' access to factual information on political opinions, an important element for making a fully informed choice. Among the social media platforms, Facebook was the prime contributor to the crafting of political narratives in the public space and to setting the electoral agenda. However, Facebook did not take appropriate measures to ensure adherence to campaign silence rules. So, these are some of the findings in our preliminary assessment in the different areas that I highlighted in the beginning of my speech. So, of course, this is our principal findings in summary, but as I said before, you will have the full findings till the moment in the statement which will be distributed to all of you. So I would like very much to thank your attention. Then after our colleague from the European Parliament gives her presentation, we will have time and we are more than ready to take your questions. So thank you so much, and let's come back for the Q&A.
Thank you very much indeed, Marisa. I'd like to hand over the floor now to the head of a delegation from the European Parliament.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Isabel Santos. I'm the chair of the delegation of the European Parliament to the presidential elections of Sri Lanka, and it is a great pleasure to have this opportunity to speak to you. The delegation of the European Parliament is composed of 5 parliamentarians from 5 European countries belonging to 4 different political groups. Represents over 500 million European citizens. We are committed to strengthening democracy all over the world. Election observation is one of our key foreign policy instruments in this process. We have observed these presidential elections integrated in the European Election Observation Mission of the European Union, led by my friend and colleague Ms. Marisa Matias, and I thank her very much for her work and cooperation. We fully endorse the preliminary findings and conclusions of the observer mission of the European Union. I would like to underline, before I comment on the elections, that the European Union attaches great importance to its partnership with Sri Lanka. The European Union financial support to Sri Lanka for the period of 2014-2020 will amount to over 210 million euros. We have also given special support for rural development, trade assistance or humanitarian aid when the country was suffering natural catastrophes. The Union is the largest trade partner of Sri Lanka. We have committed to the country and, most importantly, to its citizens. This is why we are here today. During the election mission, we met with several presidential candidates or their representatives, with diplomatic missions, civil society, organizations, and national media representatives. We also met with the Election Commission. Everywhere we went, we received an exceptional friendly reception, which we greatly appreciated. On election day, we observed voting in Colombo, Matara, and Puttala. We welcomed the high number of Sri Lankans that went to vote on a general peaceful environment. We witnessed well-organized elections. In this regard, we commend the work of the Election Commission and the staff of the polling stations. We have read reports of intimidation and instances of violence that occurred during election day. This is worrisome, yet not general tone of these elections, and I would like to underline this. These cases should be brought before the election authorities and addressed as soon as possible. Allow me now to make some comments beyond election day. We believe that the advancement of democracy in Sri Lanka would greatly benefit for more transparency. I'm speaking about the urgent need to adopt national regulation on campaigning financing. This issue has been referred to us by most of our interlocutors, and right so. Citizens have a right to know how much are parties and candidates spending in their campaigns, as well as the origin of the resources. This lack of rules results in an uneven playing field between candidates. We hope that a solid legal reform in line with past recommendations of the European Union can be adopted ahead of next parliamentarian elections. We call on candidates to this presidential election to give example by disclosing their information for campaign. We have noticed that campaigning activities are very restricted by law compared with other countries. This, in our view, limits the capacity of politicians to reach out to get closer to citizens and communities. Broadening campaign activities would help citizens and communities to engage more. We also believe that Sri Lanka's democracy system needs to ensure more openness and inclusiveness. Citizens and communities should be able to engage more on politics, if they wish so, especially women and minorities. Politics is a noble task, but it cannot be limited to an elite or to a particular group. We saw a large number of women representing political parties in the polling stations we visit, and also polling station workers. This is a good sign that needs to be followed by a larger presence of women in the national parliament. Leading democracy in this region, as Sri Lanka is doing, also means advancing inequality between women and men. What it is essential for the prosperity of any society. In addition, any democratic society needs open debate and exchange of ideas. This is essential for citizens to take informed decisions. Media presence of candidates and parties, as we observed, is extremely unbalanced. Many interlocutors have expressed to us their concern over this issue, including political representatives. The electoral authority should have effective tools to ensure a level playing field between parties and candidates, especially in relation to private media, so that all voices are heard. We are particularly worried about the spread of fake news and even hate speech of political nature and in social media during this campaign. Facebook being the most used platform during this campaign. This is a problem which not only affects Sri Lanka, but many countries in the world. We call on social platforms to take responsibility on once and for all. They must be more proactive and agile to detecting and removing contents of this nature. They need to abide by the highest standards and not hide behind national laws or the lack of them. At the same time, political parties must denounce and distance themselves from these practices. Citizens' media literacy and fact-checking tools should be developed. I would like to conclude my remarks underlining that it was very moving to see Sri Lankans side by side in exercising their democratic rights, no matter their origin, their religion, or social status. This is a sign that Sri Lankans want to work together. The reconciliation is possible. Politicians and leaders need to understand this and act to unite the country. Thank you very much for your attention and good luck, Sri Lanka.
Thank you very much indeed. I would like to open the floor now to your questions. If you have a question, if you could please identify yourself, also identify the media outlet you're representing, and say who you would like to direct the question to. And we'll take questions in batches of 2, if there are any questions. A microphone will arrive very shortly.
I am Dr. Ajanta Pereira. I was the only woman presidential candidate, and sorry, I'm sitting down. And I really want to say that I'm very happy that I stood up, and basically happy with the results as well. My question is, when you really look at the candidates, Two candidates were utilizing a fairly large amount of money, sometimes even as close to 500 millions and 375 million rupees for their campaigning, and whereas mine was around 2 million to 3 million only. And but I'm happy with the results that are achieved with a small amount of money, because the reason being to encourage more women to come into politics. But my question really is, there were 35 candidates. There were only 2 candidates who were really, or 3 candidates who were using so much of high amount of money. So when you, as the observers, how do you really feel when you see the results? Because the reason we had an election was to bring a change in the country. And that was a need at that moment. And I think everybody wanted a change. But when I see the results, I don't see a change as such, a drastic change. So what is your observation? I mean, do you think it's a fair election in that sense?
Thank you very much. And if I could ask who you are directing the question at for?
Any one of you, basically.
Thank you. We'll take one more question before we pass back to our Chief Observer and then the delegation. If there's no other question.
Hi, I'm Rifti. I'm running a Tamil website called breaking.lk. There are so many hate campaigns in the social media. You all observe that one. But do you feel that? Also, the CMEV made some observation that there are some religious places influence to the voters on the election day. So, what do you feel regarding that one?
Okay, thank you very much indeed. I wonder if you could repeat the last part of your second question, please.
Yeah, one of the election local monitors called CMEV, they tweeted some Twitter messages. There are some religious places influence the voters to vote some candidates. So are you aware of anything about that, or what kind of answer for this?
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and thank you also for being here. As on the first question, I want to start by highlighting the character of this electoral observation mission and the mandate that we have. I said it in the beginning, but we are not here in a position of making any type of acceptance or non-acceptance of the results. There's not to do with the nature, the mandate, and the principles of this observation. Saying this, we come in our preliminary findings to some of the conclusions which were presented to you, and in fact, which are some of them much related with the fact that there's an uneven level, a playing level for the candidates, and part of it has to do with the access to media, either the traditional or not, public and private, and also with the fact linked and associated with lack of regulation when it comes to finance campaigning. And you will find much more detailed data of our observation in the report, in the preliminary report. I think these are some of the dimensions that are important to highlight, but is not our task or our capacity, because one of the basic principles of the mission is non-interference, and also the others, the independence, the neutrality, the autonomy, because as you know, this electoral observation mission will produce the results of their mission, and then it will be dismissed. and then our task is done when we present the final report. So you touch important points, but it's not our capacity to make this type of analysis or to make this type of assessment. So I do apologize, but really is outside our mandate, so there's nothing much I can say on this. I don't know if Dimitri want to add something.
Hello. On the first point, by the presidential candidate, what I have to say is exactly what we are capsulating in our title of our preliminary statement, which says that a peaceful and technically well-managed electoral process marked by an uneven playing field. And it's precisely the lack of a campaign finance regulatory framework that brings all these discrepancies and gaps in the campaign activities of the candidates, and also on the amount of money that they are invested in their campaign.
Okay.
On the second...
I moved to the second, and no, it's okay, no problem. On the second question on the hate speech, I'm sorry. I could have done this in a different way, I'm really sorry. You will also find a lot of details and data and analysis on hate speech in our preliminary statement. In any case, hate speech is really a matter of concern. Is not an issue that can be related only to Sri Lanka. Unfortunately, it's something which is spread a little bit around the world. And of course, we have to take into account that's also one of the domains which need to be given more attention during the electoral process. We have a social media assessment. We had 5 people working on that, together with one of our analysts coordinating that team. And all the details, as I said, you can find in the report, all the measures, all the data, and everything. Of course, this is a major issue, which is linked to not only to social media, but mainly to social media. And in the case of social media, then there's also 2 dimensions which are important to take into account. First, the lack of regulation, but secondly, and also important, is the fact there is no responsibility of the social media platforms, or for instance, a platform like Facebook, where you can find a lot of dimensions of hate speech and fake news and other areas of miscommunication, let us call like that. The truth is that we don't have a true responsibility or means still to deal with this unless the platforms also assume a huge level of responsibility in trying to control this type of contents.
Thank you very much.
No, I'm going to, sorry.
And maybe here to add some numbers, because we have actually for the 3rd time European Union election observation missions. They are including in their component a social media monitoring unit, and the outcome and the findings of this regarding hate speech. The EUM analyzed 340 Facebook pages supporting one of the 2 leading candidates, including 165 prominent in one district, 26 of national level and 10% of local level pages featured sharply negative content. On 25 of the most popular meme pages, the EOM identified 47 political memes with a menace, including sectarian undertones. The mission identified at least 10 cases. The mission identified at least 10 cases of sharply divisive rhetoric, including 2 with a racistic message in public videos by 10 of the most subscribed YouTube influencers, those that they have more than 20,000 followers each. So you can understand that, of course, in the campaign on the ground, there have been some cases of hate speech we could identify through the campaign events that our observers attended, but mainly hateful commentary was on online media. Thank you.
Sorry, I was about your second question because I didn't answer to you. We didn't receive any reports on the issue, on the specific case that you were referring to, but that's why this is called a preliminary statement. We will stay here in the country for some weeks more, and of course all the cases should be reported and verified, but I'm not at the condition of giving you any answer for that specific case, as we didn't receive reports yet from it. But
what do you feel the polling centers in religious places?
sorry.
There are several religious places act as polling booths. How do you feel that one in Sri Lanka?
If I understood correctly, you are asking because of the existence of polling centers in religious areas. Honestly, every country has its own culture and organization and capacity to organize and make the administration of the electoral process. Our contribution here as an electoral observation mission is to guarantee that the process is as inclusive as possible, in the sense that everyone can participate and not being blocked for any type of discrimination. But then again, a lot of things, because I thought you were talking about a specific polling center, and I'm sorry I didn't understand correctly, and which I didn't have any information on. But generally speaking, we are always acting according not only to the international standards but also to the national laws, and it's our task to give support to democracy and try to help the process to be more transparent and more inclusive. But that's as much as I can say to you in this moment on that.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Does anybody else have any more questions at all?
Now we have three.
My name is Marisa. I'm the Deputy Appellation Embassy. I also have a question related to the religion. Have you also looked at the role or the involvement of the religious leaders in the campaign? Thank you.
And a second question from the gentleman there, and then I'll come to you afterwards.
I think from the island, have you heard of the campaigns about attempting to prevent minorities from voting in the election?
Sorry?
So
Could you speak?
Did you hear any campaigns about attempts to prevent minorities from voting on election days?
Attempts? No. Very briefly on religion, yes, we also have data, and as you can then see in the report, we have observed, the presence of religious leaders in both front-runners, candidates, and then you can find more details on that, but there we were able to observe that. As on the attempts, besides the information that everyone gets, we didn't get any reports from our observers in that sense.
Okay, gentleman here. Pass the mic.
Yes, all right. Mark Salter. It's a question to you.
I'm sorry, I can't
And
hear.
it's a question regarding your remarks on media bias and particularly how to address
Then I cannot answer that.
elections.
No.
And I think if I heard you correctly, you were arguing or suggesting that the Election Commission should exercise greater control over the media's operations during the election, specifically with a view to eliminating or reducing, creating a level playing field. And you noted this was particularly relevant with respect to private media. So I'm just wondering, in terms of your observations and your experience, and I'm now thinking about the mission, the observation mission as a whole, would you have any suggestions or recommendations you might want to make to the election authorities and other relevant stakeholders?
I can start and then you give the
specifically one goes about the business of monitoring and regulating private media in the context of an election, because it's an area which remains, shall we say, somewhat obscure or at least contested in Sri Lanka. There are a number of models around it, self-regulation, for example. One of the other observer groups at their press conference a few hours ago, I heard them strongly advocating for greater media self-regulation. Well, that's one approach, but there are others. Could you perhaps just elaborate, if you're able to, on how you would see Sri Lanka better handling this question in the future? Thank you.
We'll take one more question if there is from somebody in the media.
From a journalist, please. Question.
No. No. So very briefly, and then on this question that Mark raised, yes, we referred to this issue because there's a lack of regulation, as I said in my remarks. So you perfectly understand me well when I said the lack of regulation, and that the legal framework is imperfect. That we all know. And in this case, I think the absence of regulators is crucial. And here it is not at all in line with international standards. And that's also why in the previous EOM held in 2015, there were several recommendations in this domain. And although, and I want to emphasize that we make no comparisons among different electoral observation missions, because we are here to observe different elections in different contexts, underlining it very, very well. Of course, when it comes to the legal framework, there are issues and questions which are transversal to several electoral processes. And as Dimitra Ioannou was here also in 2015, perhaps she could give more details about these recommendations on the media domain, which were already presented in 2015. Now we are not yet at the stage of the recommendation, but nevertheless there's a memory on this, so perhaps Dimitra could provide more information.
Actually, the media issue is a long-standing issue in the electoral processes in Sri Lanka, and how should be regulated. It is true, in the last mission there were 5 recommendations related to media and how to, 4 and 1 was for the journalists, 4 recommendations related to media and how to cover elections in a non-partisan, non-biased manner. The idea was for a regulatory body to regulate media. However, at this stage, and before we consult with our interlocutors on these issues, I wouldn't like to come with a precise recommendation. What is important is that there is a lack in the legal framework. We believe that reforms in the legal framework will enhance the powers of the Election Commission in order also to be able to regulate private media. At the same time, there is a new, I will not use the word threat, but this is social media, and how we regulate social media and social platforms. And this is a global phenomenon. For us, also as for the Election Commission, it's also a new issue that we are facing. And I believe that with the analysis that we managed to have observing the electoral process on social media in Sri Lanka, we will come out with a recommendation that will crystallize the essence of the problem, which is legal frameworks and how national legal frameworks on election can bring together and can be implemented on social platforms like Facebook. But this is all thoughts at this moment. Thank you very much.
Yeah, also only to underline what it was said, we have
here a lack of regulation, and it's one recommendation from 2015. We hope in the future see a different situation in Sri Lanka, and we hope to have a new framework that give tools to electoral commission to act on this and promote a more equal space for everybody to campaign and to have contact and to pass the message to the citizens.
Thank you very much, Isabel. Are there any other questions before we wrap up this press conference? I should say also that our Chief Observer will be ready to answer one-on-one questions if any journalist would like to put questions to us afterwards. She's more than happy to do that. But if there are no further questions, then I and the panel would like to thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for your presence. Thank you for being here. We are not leaving yet, so we are staying for another month, continuing to observe the process. And just for your information, in more or less 2 months from now, Dimitra Ioannou and I will be back to present the final report. And again, thank you very much for your attention, and all the luck to all of you, as we all need luck. Thank you.